Okay, thank you for joining the Montana Book Festival for this conversation with Barry Maxwell and Kate Gadbow. My name is Lauren Korn. I'm here on behalf of the Montana Book Festival, and I'm excited to welcome you and our authors to this year's virtual events. With us today, as I said, are Barry Maxwell and Kate Gadbow. Barry Maxwell is a native Austinite, a former bar band drummer and bum under the bridge, and a late from the gate writer, student, and teacher. He lives in Missoula, Montana, where he admires but does not climb the mountains, and is a recent graduate of the University of Montana's MFA program. You can find some of his work online in Split Lip magazine, Crack the Spine, The Open Bar at Tin House, The Mud Season Review, and at pitheadchapel.com. Barry is the founder of the Streetlit Authors Club, which provides books and creative writing workshops to Austin and Missoula's homeless communities, and he's a fist-waving supporter of the arts in unexpected places from unexpected sources. Kate Gadbow directed the University of Montana Creative Writing Program and served on the board of the Missoula Poverello Center. Her 2003 novel, Push to Shore, won the Mary McCarthy Prize in Short Fiction from Sarah Bandy Books. Okay, to you two. Now you can take it away.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Barry.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is when somebody watches this.
I know, it's great to see your face again.
Likewise.
For those joining us, Barry, I first met 2 years ago when he took a course that I taught in the fall of 2018. I had come back as a visiting writer after being retired from the university for quite a while, and it was a great class. It was more reading than writing, but people were writing about what they were reading, and I learned early on that I was very happy I had added Barry in at the last minute because his reactions to stories were often so different than other people, and
they were horrifying for me. They were horrifying.
The stories were horrifying.
No, my reactions.
They were. They came from a different place, and I was interested in this person who had come from a different place. A lot of the students were grad students. Most in the class were grad students. Many who had been in academic English programs for a long time, and we're used to responding to writing in that way, and Barry responded with his gut. And in fact, he even, as he has pointed out, he cried in class one time.
When? Well, I did a presentation on a story by Frederick Bush called Ralph the Duck. And I brought it up because it's one of those stories that almost every time I read it, I wind up crying.
Right.
And it's like, even now, just thinking about it, I'm getting all weird. So, of course, while doing a presentation on why stories make me cry sometimes, there I was crying, and everybody's sort of like, oh. I made it through without being too ashamed of myself.
I think you and I were the only ones who had read that story before, too.
Yeah.
It had made me cry in the privacy of my home years ago. But anyway, it was a great class, and I had actually read about Barry in the Missoulian before he got into the class. So I had this other interest in having him there because I had just stopped serving on, well, I guess I did a 5-year stint from about 2007 to 12 on the board of directors of the local Poverello Center. And this is during the time we were raising money for and building the new building. And I knew there were classrooms in there, and I was hoping something was going to happen in those classrooms when we got them. And Barry had come here from Austin and set up some workshops here in our homeless shelter, which he had also done in Austin. And then I learned more about Barry and his past and what connected him to homelessness. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it, Barry.
Oh God, my past.
Your past, your deep dark past. Start with the rock bands.
Oh, well, that's what I did right out of high school, and I never really had like the ambition to be a rock star or anything, but it was a hell of a place to learn how to drink and get all the drugs you could. Um, and it's like during the course of life, I had marriages, I had stepsons, I had pets, and this and that and the other. But basically, I partied until I was homeless, and in 2007, I got DWI, uh, which I was well deserved, and I should have gotten one many, many years before. But that was sort of a tipping point where I kind of gave up on myself. And good grief, I was thinking about it this morning. I got a DWI in, I forget what month it was. Some alert driver called in about me swerving or falling asleep or something. I don't know. But within a couple of weeks, I got a public intoxication because I was drunk behind the wheel again and pulled over and passed out. And it's like I didn't learn any lessons. But from that, everything went downhill, and I wound up couch hopping for a while, living on Lake Travis near Austin for a while with some meth heads. Went to Kentucky where I actually had some work for a bit, and then came back to Texas to take care of my legal problems. I was in a motel room blowing my cash, drinking vodka and OJ in the bathtub when the cops knocked on the door and took me to jail for the DWI warrant. And after that, I officially became like what I consider like urban homeless, because I don't know, I was dropped off downtown in Austin, a couple of blocks from the homeless shelter, and spent that night like hiding behind a bush basically next to the police station. And then I went and checked into the shelter the next day. I can't remember exactly when that was, but I spent about a year and a half homeless on the streets in Austin, living in the shelter system and so on. And that's what led up to the point I was trying to make, I guess. It seems like the life before all that was somebody else. I still have connections with people from my previous life, but the homeless experience and bumping up against that big wall was a definite turning point in how I identify myself and where I put my attention. And
what about the people around you? I mean, did you learn anything about homelessness just from being in the shelters?
well, yeah, I learned how to do it. There's no manual. There's no guidebook or quick start tip sheet, and it's basically scary as hell. I had been brought up just a little white boy in a white neighborhood in a suburb of Austin, and pretty much sheltered, and kind of was taken care of all the time, even in bands or whatever, and in the marriages I was in. I was always the one that was, the liability, and somebody had to take care of me at all times. And I guess in a homeless shelter, it's sort of like you are taken care of. You have some sort of security, but you're also just vastly alone, and especially at the beginning before you know anyone. And it's like suddenly you're a number. I checked in, I was 113, 119. That was my service point software number. And after I got out, which is a whole nother story, I was able to get my attendance records, because they book you in every night in Austin, at least, by your number. And I had the records of every night I was there, and I was able to piece together things. It's like there was one time where I was away for a month or so, and it's like, oh, that's when I was doing this. And then I would disappear for a week and come back for a day, and then have hospital records from a little alcohol poisoning and incidents like that. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's where I was, and it changed my outlook on everything. Also, it's hard to even say what did I feel about homeless people before that. Probably the typical kind of scornful, disdainful feeling, but now I know better.
Right. So then the transition to, you went to school, started writing?
Well, that's kind of where everything changed. There wasn't really like a rock bottom moment that I remember, but it's sort of a change of perception, because there were people in the shelter in Austin. I remember one guy, he had been living there for 17 years.
Wow.
Just coming in nightly, drawing a number and getting a mat and sleeping. And everywhere you go, the bums under the bridges, old guys, grizzled, the bearded camo dude with whiskey under his jacket. And I just saw that as my future, and I wasn't willing to accept that. And I made my way one hungover morning to it's a psychiatric emergency place in Austin. I can't remember the organization, but they put me on a waiting list for rehab. So I had like 30 days to really party until I went to rehab. And it stuck. So it was in 2010, 2011. And an organization in Austin run by the Catholic Church, I believe it's called Caritas. My case manager at the homeless shelter connected me with a guy there who connected me with a room and sort of a group home. And I'm getting to the point, I promise.
This is the point.
one of the deals for having a room in this house with, there were 4 other guys, was you either work at least part-time or you volunteer. You can't just stay there without taking any sort of action. And I've always been a little bit lazy about like going and getting a job. So my first thought was, hey, if I'm going to have to get a job, I need to get a GED, because I never did graduate from high school. I decided to play drums instead. Anyway, I went to Austin Community College, did a GED prep course, and got that. And it turned out I was the valedictorian of the GED region or something, which earned me a little scholarship grant. So from that, I was sort of talked into taking credit courses. And I remember to this day, I was standing at the kiosk where you decide on what you're going to do when you're registering for classes. And I was originally going to take a web design certificate course. And it's like, wow, maybe I won't have to dig a ditch with my new GED. And then I thought about it, and I looked into their creative writing program, and there were openings in the classes there. So I went for that and wound up, it took more than 2 years, but I wound up with an associate's degree, which was nice. And that's really what got me rolling. Community college led to the thoughts of, wow, maybe I could transfer, to a real school. And and I got lucky again and won a full ride through UT in Austin.
Wow.
And finished up that degree. And then started shopping around for MFA programs. Montana decided they liked me enough to say, come on, and I did.
We're all glad you did.
Thank you.
So how about what reconnected you to the shelters in Austin? It would seem like you'd want to just put that part of your life behind you in some ways.
In a lot of ways, yeah, but and I'll stick with that for a second, because there were times when I was out of the shelter and living in the group home, but I was taking the bus around town, this and that and the other, and I could just like feel my chest bind up and my stomach drop every time we came close to that part of town. And it's like I was physically afraid of the place, I think. But in community college, I was in a class where we had to do a Make a Difference project. And I gathered up some folks in the class, and we started a book drive. And we're taking books down to the shelter. We decided on the term street lit, which I didn't know was a genre at the time, but it had the street, we're light, and a lot of the people we take books to might be somewhat lit. So, so we got that going, and there was huge involvement from the professors at Austin Community College, And then when I went to UT, we had a lot of involvement there. During my interview for the scholarship for UT, there was another time I started crying. Because I had included in my essays and so on that at some point I would like to go and start a writing workshop at the shelter, based on what we'd done with the books, which was hugely successful. And the thought was that in the time that I was there, I got lucky and hung with some pretty smart people. Smart to a point. They were super intelligent and then screwed up just as badly as I did. So I got to hang around with smarter people who had been to college and so on. And our time was just generally wasted in all senses of the word. And had there been something to go do that we would have been interested in, I think that would have helped us. It creates community. It creates a sense of, being able to talk to the outside world, the real world as we thought of it. I mean, normal people we called civilians, and we were residentially challenged. So I talked in my interview for the scholarship about this and just started bawling. And it's like, oh God, I've totally blown it. and then find out later, it's like, Barry, that's how we knew you were sincere. So the tears worked that time. Totally unplanned.
Too. You got an A.
Yeah. So I started up the workshop at the shelter in Austin. It was a huge success. I thought I would have to sell the shelter people on the idea, but I went into a meeting with them. I was nervous as all hell and freaked out to be in the shelter again. And I wasn't like a minute into talking about it. It's like, what do you need? What can we do? And it started like within a week of talking to them. The folks at Austin Community College, I had professors from there come visit. I had professors from UT. A woman I totally admire from, North Texas University. She drove down from Denton, Texas.
Wow.
Just to do a workshop one day. Jill Talbot, Charlotte Gulick, Deb Olin Unferth, Elizabeth McCracken came. Tons of great people. And I felt completely supported. We usually had like a dozen or more in the workshop.
Wow.
And when I decided to come here, a couple of guys from the shelter, one who I'd been a classmate of at UT, took over the program. Now, of course, everything's on hold now. But it was really satisfying to know that it kept on rolling after I left.
What kind of writing did you get, or did you solicit from people?
Anything.
Anything they wanted to write.
Yeah. I had one guy that wrote really silly sort of sing-song poems, almost childish, but awesome in their adult content.
Right.
Had another guy who was like a deep philosophical atheist who wrote these huge, intricate poems about his philosophies. Had one young lady who was a blog writer. Lots of people just doing their memoir for themselves, almost like just journaling and then sharing that with the group. Had people writing short stories, had people that were aiming for novels. I'm still in touch with one guy who's still working on his vastly complex thriller novel.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I've still got some contact with some of the writers that came to the group, which is really, really nice to know. I made some actual friends there.
Yeah. So you get here to Missoula, you're absolutely busy with all the things you're doing on campus, and you took a bunch of classes at the same time, but you decided to start a workshop at our homeless shelter. And
yeah,
how did that go?
It went well. There's a much smaller homeless population here than in Austin, obviously. So the group was, smaller as well. No huge numbers, but like 3, 4, 5, 6 people, which is fine.
Which is great.
Yeah. And I've got a woman who's done wonderful memoir work and is also working on 2 novels at once.
Wow.
And she's really on to me. It's like, Barry, we need to do some Zoom meetings. we need to get this thing going again. So I think we're going to pick back up.
You're trying to keep it up even
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. One fellow who he actually has his own small church is working long-term on a daily devotional book for men.
Wow.
Another guy who's doing his memoirs, Stephen, he was published in the Independent when there was an article about us in there.
Right. I remember
And yeah, nut shit. That's his favorite word. But he's working on the chronicles of his bad days. Yeah, go ahead.
So are you're in connection then with the Poverello since we've been under all this pandemic pressure there too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing I could do there at the location, but we may wind up doing some Zoom meetings. We may get into a park someplace where we can sit around several feet from each other and at least maintain the connection.
Yeah.
I started a little free library up front, which somebody took
That's written up too.
Yeah. Somebody took the doorknobs off the little doors recently, so I need to go back by and put the doors together. It was kind of smashed up over the summer, so that was a little project gluing it back together. But it's consistently emptied, which is really nice. So the books are getting read.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So now, am I right in thinking you're also embarking on is it a master's in social work or a sociology degree?
Well, I'm headed towards applying for a master's in social work. Meanwhile, I'm taking courses that can apply toward a bachelor's in social work. So I'm sort of iffy. I'm considered a freshman. And I'm able to take some electives. Yeah, it's like I'm super non-traditional. I'm a freshman on campus. I just got my MFA last year.
Right.
And now I'm teaching an honors intro to fiction course, which looks like it's going to be a blast. So I'm not really sure what to call myself at the moment. I'm the student and a professor, and I'm confused.
What pointed? I guess the obvious thing is working with homeless people. That I know a lot of the staff at the POV have masters in social work. And was that your idea that you may try to again work in those communities, or?
I would like to see some way to wrap the 2 things together, the writing and have some official social work training rather than just, what I absorbed while I was a client. But I would like to see those 2 melded somehow. And it's easier to get a job as a social worker. I think we're going to need more of them very soon.
Yeah.
So actually I can do some real good on a larger scale as well as do some real good on a smaller scale with the workshops. So I don't want to give up either. And I want to be able to walk into a shelter somewhere, anywhere, and have both things to offer, really.
Right. How's your own writing? Are you getting things done in the middle of this? I've talked to so many people who can hardly read a book, or at least early on, that was the problem.
I'll confess, I have not written a word during the summer. And I don't feel bad about it, simply because, all right, I've been in school 10 years, now more.
Right.
And I didn't expect to go back to school this fall, but I am. And it was actually kind of a welcome break. And I'm sort of a homebody anyway. The mountains look fine out there. I don't have to go climb them. And the isolation wasn't really difficult. My roommate and I, we handled it well. And now masking up and rarely going out. but,
No, I
no,
think, how are you teaching your class? Is that any in person or is it?
right now we're keeping it online. I've had 2 asynchronous days where they're doing like questionnaires and getting to know each other kind of things. And then we're doing our first synchronous Zoom meeting tomorrow.
How many students?
Yeah, we've got 20 right now.
Wow, that's a big for an honors class.
Yeah, and people are still sorting themselves out. I have one that just signed on a couple of days ago, and then one that had to leave. And for some reason, all these students I see are so ambitious. It's like they're taking 15, 18 hours of classes, and I don't have a clue how they've managed to pull that off. Maybe I'm just that old.
And most of them have to be synchronized, so they actually have to be present at the computer.
Yeah.
When everyone else is.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by the whole process. I think it sounds so hard.
Well, it's going to be strange. Tomorrow we're going to do just everybody seeing each other's faces to some degree and being able to speak to one another. And then the following week, we're going to reassess. I've got a great big classroom assigned. It's like a small theater-sized room.
Wow.
So if we do get everybody together on campus for workshops, which I hope for,
you can spread them out.
Yeah, we'll have room to space all of us out and still be together. I mean, I've been in online writing courses where we've workshopped each other's material and so on, and it does the job. But part of it is, seeing each other's faces and being able to have immediate conversations where everybody's talking over everybody, and
and have a spontaneous reaction or change your mind about what you said about somebody's work.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm aiming for that, but I want to see what the campus does. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the way things have been going, but people can get tested, but only if they're symptomatic. So logic says that doesn't do a whole lot of good for everybody they've been in the room with.
No.
So I'm gonna wait. I'm erring on the side of safety for everybody involved right now.
Do you know where your students are from? Are a lot of them from out of state in your program?
The majority of them are in-state students from different cities around Montana. I don't have the other out-of-state folks in my head, but it's the main thing that I'm impressed with, other than diversity of origin. I think we range from 18 years old to 65 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually not the oldest human
You're
in the class.
That's great.
And I love it when things like that happen, because in my experience, when I was in classes all the way through as a non-traditional student, just being around the younger people just really kind of sparked things that wouldn't have been sparked otherwise. So I'm really happy.
I think that's really important. And I also think, life experience gives you a lot to write about.
Oh, of course.
I taught a couple Molly writing courses after I retired because I just didn't quite want to let go of teaching. And all of these people had to be at least 55. That was cut off. So I had a 90-year-old woman in the class who wrote about, pioneer days in North Dakota. So it's great. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I'm glad you're doing it. I think it kind of does feed your own writing when you're talking about it.
Absolutely, it's kind of getting me back in the mood again. I can turn off the TV. One of the things that I'm hoping for is to sort of, well, if you'd read my syllabus, you would know I'm very against cramming the old white dude canon down everybody's throats again. It's like there's no Hemingway, there's no John Updike, okay, all this is awesome, but pretty much everything I'm bringing in is maybe within the past decade or so. A lot of really short fiction, a lot of online stuff.
That's great. Well, that's what I loved about that class we did a couple falls ago. You know, the focus of it was contemporary fiction, and there's a lot going on that's so different that students really don't get in their high school preparation too.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that I'm bringing in for readings, it's very, very short stuff. And even though it's a fiction course, I'm bringing in some great short memoir pieces, poetry, prose poetry,
Great.
anything to kind of open people's minds to how they can treat their words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be awesome. I was looking at the readings that I have them looking at this week and just realized that they're all as gloomy as hell. So I'm gonna have to bring in some comic writing tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to start applying your social work skills.
Yeah. Let's not all cry over what we just read.
Yeah, no, I do think it's it's a tough time for everybody. And I think that, you know, you're kind of spanning and staying connected with people who are stressed in a lot of different ways. I think students are, and I certainly, the homeless community is really, really suffering now. And I'm afraid there are going to be more, you know, if we don't get some rental forgiveness and things.
Yeah, I can easily imagine a new wave of freshly homeless folks who
I know.
did not have enough aid or family support or whatever to make it through this.
No. And I do think the people you're dealing with, the true freshmen in your class too, they went through quite a thing last spring, you know, not graduating from high school and suddenly, you know, wondering if they should come to college. And it must be kind of scary to think of coming to college too.
Well, I try to keep
I admire all of you as I sit in my house and play with my dog and my grandson.
Right. I've always been curious about your time at the Poverello Center, in the machinery behind the organization, because you were on the board during the time when I was just heading for the shelter in Austin.
Oh, that is quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you know, I think when I retired, I knew I didn't want to just stay at home. And I also, you know, I kind of got into a stalled place in my own writing. I wanted to be part of the community in a way that I hadn't been. You know, the university community is pretty insular in a lot of ways, you know, and so I did volunteer to be on this board, and I ended up being the board president for a couple years at a time when we were trying to find a location for the new building. And it was very interesting because it brings out people's fears. It brings out their you know, assumptions about why people are homeless. And I got to know the staff at the center, who were just an amazing group of people. And then I got to learn about things like bonding for a building and you know, how you get financing, and we did a lot of fundraising.
I imagine you learned things you never expected.
I did, and but I did learn a lot. You know, I met some wonderful people, and the board was comprised of a really good mix of community members who all brought different skills to it, you know, and many were a couple were old friends, but most of them were people I had never known. It was a great experience, and just trying to figure out how people in a community like that live best in that community.
Right.
Talking with the architect about designing the building, you know, how many showers do you need? Yeah. Where do you put laundry? Where can people put their things?
Yeah.
Because that's what the old building didn't have, is, you know, just place for storage for people, what they're carrying around, and it's their whole life they're carrying around.
I've got to comment that is just huge. you reduce yourself to a backpack or a backpack and a duffel bag or a shopping cart or whatever your approach.
Right.
In Austin at the Arch there, they had a limited number of lockers. And basically there was a lottery for lockers. And if you got one, you could hang on to it, but you had to reapply every month to make sure you were actually using it. Of course, mine, I was awful. I would, whenever book donations would come in, I'd skim all the good ones off and stuff my locker full. Then after I read them, I'd take them to half-price books, sell them for cash, and go to the liquor store. But I try to run things differently now. But I just noticed in the Austin paper a few days ago, they've started a program where they're using like the big blue trash can size recycling bins, and they're somehow setting it up as storage spaces for the homeless folks in Austin. I have no idea about it beyond that. But just having that capability, if you get lucky enough to have a job interview,
oh my God.
What are you going to do? Walk in with all your stuff? It doesn't play very well.
With all your stuff, and then we have the added complication of trying not to make people sick, or people not getting close to each other. I've just been amazed here by the Poverello keeping COVID out until just very recently. It was amazing.
Yeah. I can't really even comprehend how they've managed it so far.
But it's a great community, and I'm glad you're keeping your hand in there. I think you're going to be an amazing teacher or whatever it is you end up doing.
I can follow your examples.
Yeah. But thanks so much, Barry. I just think it's great that we've had a chance to talk.
I'm so happy to see you. It's got a fan in me, so
that's
so
a
much.
big part of it, is to just stay connected, and I think it's great that that the festival is going on too.
I know. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren, for being a badass behind the scenes here.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you taking part in this year's festival, and joining us today. Just a note on the festival side, a reminder to those of you watching today, you can purchase Kate's book and books by other festival authors on Fact and Fiction's website at factandfictionbooks.com. You can also purchase Montana Book Festival merchandise on our website, montanabookfestival.com. There you can also donate so that we can keep our programming running through the fall with our MBF Plus events. Again, Kate and Barry, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.